All right, today I'm working on a 2008 Polaris Sportsman 500 HO. I had an outside CV boot that I need to replace. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the wheel bearings out, ball joints, and replace it all while I'm there. I have taken everything apart, cleaned all the parts, put everything back together just so I could make a short video to show you how everything came off. The first thing you're going to need to do is break your ball joints. I use a ball joint puller like this. Got it at the local auto parts place. I think it was $10 at AutoZone. Get your ball joints broke down, struts off. Next thing you're going to need to do is get your axle shafts out. Here's your differential, and the end of your shaft is splined and goes into your differential. There's no dust seal or oil seal or anything in there, so water gets in there and rust up, and these things can be hard to get out. I assume if they were, had anti-seize or something in there, you could probably take a pry bar and pry against the back of your housing there and pop them off. I tried it a little bit. This one was tight, so I didn't pry too hard against that. I'm worried about breaking the housing on the differential. It is a Polaris. I don't like to pry on anything too hard because they break pretty easy. What I did is I took a piece of angle here with a hole drilled in the end, set on the end of the axle here, and took a hammer and hit it until I backed the axle out. Let me show you how I did here. Now, like I said, I've already taken these out, so this is going to pop right out. When I did the first time, it took some hitting to get it out of here. Get your whatever you have up here. Get your axle straight. Pull your slack out of your joints there. Smack it and it'll come out. Now, like I said, that came out real easy there. But when you're first taking it out, it's going to be a good bit harder than that. Right here is what you're fighting. You've got a splines on the end of your axle shaft, and there's a C-clip here on the end. And this, when you first drive your shaft in, this C-clip compresses. Once it gets behind the shafts on the inside of the differential, it expands back out, which is what holds your axle into the differential. Your outer CV joint is held together with the same kind of clip, and I'll break that down for you here in a little while and show you how to do that. All right, so we've got our axle out. Next thing you're going to do is work on your ball joints. The first thing you need to do is on the bottom of your strut, your ball joint is in here. You need to take this retaining ring off. These are, I think it's like a 14 Allen head. And you need to be real careful. These are Loctited in. Make sure you get your Allen wrench down in there real well. You don't want to strip those out. That'd be a real pain in the butt if you strip those out to get those out. All right, ball joints. I like to use the threads on the ball joint itself to pull it out. And like I said, I've already taken this out. Normally it's flush with the bottom of the strut here. I just drove it back in there about a third of the way just to show you how I pulled it out. I use some different bearing races, tubing, washers, things to stack on there to pull it out. Make sure whatever you use is bigger around your ball joint. When you get started, make sure that whatever you put down is not over top of the ball joint anywhere, because then you'd just be pulling against yourself. All right, so I'm going to stack a couple races here, a couple washers, and let's put the castle nut on here. Let's see what we got. And again, this is going to come out real easy, just because I've already pulled it out and put it back in. All right, 14 millimeter wrench, and start spinning. When you first first start pulling on this, it's going to pull pretty hard until it breaks loose, and then it'll get fairly easy. And as you're turning this, it'll turn easy, and if it tightens up, you need to stop and back everything off and see what you're hung up on. I just tightened up, so I'm going to pull this all apart and see what I'm hanging up on. All right, I'm hanging up on my second set of bearing races there. You can see I was pulling against those races. All right, so now I'm going to stack this piece of tubing on here, a couple washers, and see if I can pull it the rest of the way out. Get it nice and centered up there, snug it down, start turning. All right, and there it comes. All right, again, I'd already taken this out. I just drove it in there a little way, so it came out real easy. You'll probably have to restack things 4 or 5 times to get it out of there, but that's how you do it. That's the easy way. I have, in the past, use another method. My neighbor, who has a Polaris, is not real big on maintenance, and twice now he's brought me his machine with broken ball joints, and this is the actual ball joint here. The shaft and the ball was actually gone out of his, broken off. So what I did, if you can imagine, this is the bottom of the ball joint. It's down in there, and it's flush with the bottom of the strut. I took a nut just a little bit smaller than the actual ball joint itself and welded it on there. You got to make sure that if you do something like that, that when you're burning that nut on there, that it's the nut's smaller so that you're not burning into the aluminum on the strut. Once I burnt that on there real good, I took an impact and a socket and spun it out of there. It worked real well, but I wouldn't recommend doing it because I think that it probably wallers this out a little bit. It was fine for a last resort, and I guess if you really wanted to do it that way, you could take a cut-off wheel and cut your shaft off of it, but I just wouldn't recommend it except for a last resort. All right, next thing we're going to do is wheel bearings. Like I said, I drove these part of the way back in just to show you how they came out. Here is the other strut with the wheel bearing all the way out. If you can see, there's a little lip that your bearing drives in this direction and drives down onto that lip. Then it's held in by sure clip. Use your snap ring pliers there, get your clip off, drive your bearing out this direction. Your axle is coming in this direction. What I use to drive it out is a socket that just fits inside that lip. All right, and when I did these two struts here, one of them, I took a hammer, beat it out. One of them, I put in the press and drove it out with the socket. And being a Polaris, this socket that, I got 2 sockets here. One of them, which is a little bit bigger, fit in this strut and wouldn't fit in this one. Doesn't surprise me, it's a Polaris. They're not real big on attention to detail. But what I'm driving against is the outside of the bearing race. That way, you're not driving on the inside. You want to be driving on the outside of the bearing race. You want to use the biggest socket or whatever you're putting in there that you can, biggest one you can get to go through there. Like I said, this is going to come out pretty easy because I just smacked it back in there a little bit. But this is the idea, and that's how it works. And there it came out. And to put your new bearings back in, you are just going to do the opposite. Make sure when you get your bearings started, make sure you get it started nice and straight. Maybe tap, I'll probably just use a hammer, tap around it, get it started. Maybe lay a piece of wood over there on the first smack and get smacked straight in. But once you get it going straight, it won't be too bad. Once you get down so far, it can't wallow around anyway. But getting it started, it's pretty important to keep it straight. You don't want to mess anything up there. All right, that's your wheel bearings. Next thing, I'm going to show you how to break down the CV joint. When I do CV joints, I like to completely tear them down. I like to tear them down to get all the grease out. If you mix different types of grease, they don't always work well together. So I take all the races and everything out of the CVs, clean them up real good. As you can see, this one here has had some moisture in it. It's got some corroded spots on it. I'm not too bothered about it. I'm gonna put it back together, run it. It's just a machine I use here on the farm. I'm not worried about it breaking down and leaving me stranded or anything. And if it lasts, it lasts. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But anyway, probably if you were, all you did was haul your machine around and trail ride somewhere, you'd probably want to replace this axle with if you had corrosion like that. But anyway, let me try to get you set up here so you can see what I'm going to do. Of course, when you first do this is full grease, and there's your boot. You're going to have to get your clamps off here that hold your boot on there. What you have here is your outer race, your balls, your cage, and your inner race. There's a ring in here, just like I showed you on the end of the axle shaft, that holds that in there. I'm going to use a brass drift. I want to get on an ear of the inner race there. And this is going to come off fairly easy. Of course, the first time you're going to be fighting a bunch of grease, and it's going to take a little more effort to get it off of here. But smack it a couple times, pop right off of there. All right, and now I'll break this thing down for you and show you how to get all these balls and everything out. Wrap your splines up real good before you put it in the vise. I'm going to try to tilt it here a little bit so I can get set up so you can see what I'm doing here. See if you can see. All right. What you do is just keep rotating it around until you get balls up high where you can get a hold of them, get them out. Just start picking them out. And it'll get hung up sometimes. Just keep moving it around. You'll get them out of there. There we go. Got all the balls out. So now we need to get the cage and the inner race out. If you turn your cage with the race in it 90 degrees, get around here so I can see, so you can see here, and spin it so that two of the slots opposite each other that had balls in them were in here where the balls weren't, and just kind of move it here. Try and do this with one hand here. It'll slide right out. All right. So now you have your inner race and your cage. And when you take this apart, you need to make sure you keep track of which side was down, because the race goes, one side goes down, and the cage, one side goes down. On this particular one here, the inner race has some markings here on the back. You can see the groove inside there where the clip sits, and the bottom side of the cage has a flat area on it, and the opening for the bottom is smaller than the top. So when we put it back in, we want the inner race markings on the bottom, and the small spot of the cage down. To get your inner race out, pull it out here and look on your ears here, and if you can see, this ear here has a beveled edge on it. This next one does not. Opposite the ear with the beveled edge is another beveled ear. If you turn those, the ones that have the bevels, turn them to a slot on either side, rotate it 90 degrees up, it'll roll right out of there. So now you have all your pieces. Clean them real well, and putting them back together is just the opposite. Take your beveled ears there, roll them in, spin it 90 degrees, and now you've got your cage back in, or your inner race back in your cage. Then take do the same thing here. Look for, see if I can see here. Okay, I'm going to set it back in with the slots here and here where the balls weren't. The balls go in these little places here. See if I can do this with one hand. So you see my slot, set it in there, spin it over. Okay, now you've got your race, your inner race, and your cage back in. So now you're going to stick your balls back in, and that's just the opposite of how you took them out. Make sure you have the inner race lined up with the slots. Just start rotating it around and sticking your balls back in. And there you go. It's all back together. Now, of course, when you put this back together, you're going to, before you put all this back in there, you're going to pack it up real good with grease. And I really like to pile it in there. And all these CV replacement kits come with grease. I assume it's the right stuff, but these days everything's made in China, and I don't necessarily trust it. I'll show you what I like to use. This is what I use. It is a lithium-based moly fortified grease. The reason I use that is because I'm a Toyota guy. Toyota's been making CV axles since the 60s. Probably earlier than that, and that's the kind of grease they recommend in their CVs. And the guys at Toyota are way smarter than the guys at Polaris. So anything Toyota says, I'll stick with it. All right, putting our axle back together. You would, of course, slide your boot on here first. You have all your grease packed in there, and you just take your axle, put it in here, turn it till your splines match up. And then that little C-clip ring, there's a groove in the top of the inner race there. That little C-clip will fall right in that groove. See if you can see it there. See, it fell in that groove on the top of the inner race. And then all you have to do is just come up here on the top and just smack it a little bit with a hammer, and it'll drive right in there. There it went. All right, and then just drive it the rest of the way. You can take it and smack it on the bench or something, and it'll go all the way in there. And then once you'll see that your splines to probably be about 1/8 of an inch. I didn't drive this all the way in there, but when you get it all the way, there'll be about 1/8 of an inch of splines left, still sticking out. And then just pull on the axle either way. Make sure that C-clip's locked in there. And then, of course, your boot would already be on here on the shaft. Slide your boot back down over there, put your clamps on, and you'd be done. All right, I hope this video helped you. Sorry I didn't have the other parts to put back in to show you, but everything is just the reverse of what I did here, putting everything back in. Oh, and another thing, here's your, after you take that axle out in here, you can see how corroded and rusty it is in there. I'll probably take the end of the axles, clean them off real good, clean it off in here, put a bunch of anti-seize in there, and maybe next time I put it in there, I can just take a pry bar and pry against there, not real hard, and pop it right out. Thanks for watching. Hope this helps.